Hello and welcome to the Brodie Blueprint, the podcast designed to help college students and young professionals navigate their career paths. Each episode, we sit down with industry experts from finance, business, sports, education, and more to uncover their journeys, daily experiences, and lessons they've learned along the way. Whether you're exploring career options, looking for networking advice, or just curious about different industries, this is the place for you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hi everybody, welcome back to episode 10 of the Brodie Blueprint. Today I am joined by a multi-sport broadcaster currently with the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, Mr. Matt Davis. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to have you, sir.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me, Jack. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Looking forward to talking to you. Matt's got experience with, over 6 minor league baseball teams, a few NCAA D1 schools, and he's also had a few television appearances. So there's a lot of interesting stuff I want to get into talking about. First of all, you went to a huge sports school, the University of Alabama, but obviously you're interested in media and things like that. So tell us a little bit about your time at school and how you got into this line of work.
God, where to begin? My dad went to Alabama, so I grew up wanting to go there. I remember going to my mom's college reunion. She went to a very tiny liberal arts school in Massachusetts. I was like 10, and me being me, I love to be loud. Scott will tell you, because I know you had him on one of your recent episodes. He'll tell you he could be standing on the other side of Jacksonville and you can hear me. And it's the biggest city in America by land. So I just knew that I always wanted to go there. And my mom had a quote. She said, "Do you want to go somewhere like here or maybe somewhere like a rah-rah school?" And even at 10, I knew I wanted to go there. So it was the best decision I ever made. A lot of friends made there, a lot of cool things to be seen. Nick Saban won a lot of championships in my time there. So it was a good time to go there between 2012 and 2016.
Amazing. Sounds like a good time for you, a Bama fan anyway. Tell us a little bit more about your studies. Obviously, sport broadcasting, telecommunication, a bit of film in there as well. Were you always drawn to kind of studying these things? Were you always interested in them, or how did that land in your path?
So it's actually kind of funny. I actually was interested in it way before I was even at college. I remember, me and my family, we loved going on vacations. And, when we go on vacations, we don't really do like the Disney World or the Disneyland. Personally, I've never been there, and I live 30 minutes or 2 hours away from Orlando, Florida. So I've never been there. But what we like doing is we like going to see things like historical things. So when we were planning vacations, most of the time they were in cities that actually had major league ballparks. We'd go take tours of those ballparks. I remember specifically when we went to Baltimore, Maryland, we went to the Babe Ruth Museum. My dad is a huge Yankees fan. So he grew up probably 6 blocks away from the old Yankee Stadium. So I grew up rooting for the Yanks. And I remember in the basement of the Babe Ruth Museum, it's actually an apartment that he lived in. There is a picnic table with an old school stand microphone. And on the projector, they're playing a replay of Cal Ripken Jr.'s home run. I believe it was at one of the All-Star games, I think at Safeco, or the old Safeco field where the Mariners play. And I remember it was an immersive experience. You got to sit there and actually call what was going on. Maybe 10, 12. And I think it was at that moment I knew I wanted to do that. Now, obviously, when you grow up, you want to be a professional athlete. That's the dream for every kid that plays sports. And I always said to myself, well, all right, well, I'll go play professional baseball, but then I want to do maybe like MLB Network, want to be on TV. So it was always there. And obviously I never gave up on that dream. I tried to make the Alabama baseball team as a freshman. I got hurt my back. And I believe that was God's way of telling me, you need to go this way, not that way. Stop arguing with me. And so plan B became plan A. And I don't regret it whatsoever. It was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So
amazing. No, I think especially, like you said, every young kid's dream is to work in sport. And I think, a lot of people don't realize how many careers can go alongside that. And, you're still getting to live what's a great, great career for someone who loves and is passionate about sports. That's amazing to hear. It really is. Obviously, a lot of students listen to this podcast. I'm a student who's looking for internships. You had a couple of great internships. You were a production intern, a broadcasting and media intern. Tell us a little bit about how you got into those roles, what you learned from them, and kind of any lessons that really stuck with you from those young experiences.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny. I got those internships. I actually had no idea how to get into professional baseball. It was something that I've always wanted to do. I had a bunch of buddies that I met post-college, and I would ask them how you got into this. They said, "Oh, we did college internship." And I was thinking to myself, I wish I had an advisor that told me that this is what you can do. I was actually the only, probably in my senior media class of, I want to say 30, I was probably the only student that actually wanted to go into radio. Everybody else wanted to do some sort of TV, whether, the girls wanted to be an anchor or a sideline reporter, the guys wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be, an anchor or producer behind the
Yeah.
camera. I was the only guy that was interested in radio, no TV at all. Um,
Okay.
and I actually tried to steer myself towards only doing radio. And I spoke to a couple of upperclassmen at the time when I was a freshman, and they told me that the local sports station was not in Tuscaloosa, it was in Birmingham.
Okay.
And it was a CBS affiliate. And so that's actually how I got my start. I knew a couple of guys that interned over there, so they kind of put in a word for me. About my junior year, when I was taking my first internship class, I sent an email to the lead producer at the sports station, Jocks 94.5, John Saber. I still somewhat keep in touch with him. He's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
He'll kind of text me, at times when I reach milestones. So he would tell me,
Excellent.
"Oh, you found your dream girl when I got married, and now your dream career," and all that. He's like, so I still keep in touch with a lot of people at that radio station. But yeah, so I was actually wanting to figure out how to be on the air. And so that's when I went to be a production intern. Again, I didn't really know what I was doing. I interned at Tide 99.1 at the time, which was a local
Okay.
ESPN affiliate in Tuscaloosa. I did a little bit of logging. I remember I went through and edited some songs. Wasn't really that much of an internship. It was
Okay.
great. I got to meet the host, but my real big internship where I actually got immersed in the whole production side was my senior year at Jocks as a production intern there. But yeah, it was just through touching base through upperclassmen and kind of picking their brains about, all right, what's the great show to work on? What's my schedule like? Building it around my schedule. And,
Yeah.
I got very lucky. I got on the Matt and Scott show, and they were two guys from Texas that were running a
Mm-hmm.
show in Alabama. And it was one of the best, probably the best internship that I ever had.
Amazing, amazing. That's a unique perspective. We haven't really had anyone that's come on and said they stumbled across an opportunity because they were told by fellow students. So that's something new that we haven't really heard yet. What I don't know how to put this across. Our big thing with this podcast is networking and understanding how to start networking. And it sounds like you spoke to people in your classes. They were all interested in similar things, but maybe not the exact thing you wanted to do. Did you get into networking at your time at school, or when was your first experiences with actual networking?
My first experience networking was, oh boy, I was probably 2 years out of school, a year,
Mm-hmm.
trying to remember. So
Yeah.
I graduated in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no idea how to get into professional baseball. None.
Okay.
I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I was more stuck at the time. I didn't have a job when I graduated, and so that was a little scary.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I was applying left and right, anything I could get. And I got something at like the last minute. I was probably a couple months out of college, and the radio station I interned for was part of a cluster from Cumulus Media. So I
Okay.
don't know if you've ever been to a radio station before, but most of the time it's not just one radio station. In a building, you can have 6 or 7 stations that are literally just an office, a mixer, and 1 to 4 microphones.
Okay.
And it's literally just how they're programmed. And so at the sports station down the hall, they had hip hop, they had news, they had country. So at the time, their news station was on AM only. And they
Okay.
had a 99.5 Nash Icon, which around the United States is a country radio station. Well, they
Okay.
were shutting it down and turning it into a news talk station. And I was talking to my the guy that was my supervisor as the
Mm-hmm.
intern supervisor, and he let me know. He connected me with a couple of other people because I would assist on other talk shows, other morning sports shows, and one of the morning show or the Friday night high school football show producer was
Mm-hmm.
the head producer of the news station, and they were launching a new FM talk station for news talk
Okay.
radio. So they knew I was looking for a job. They actually hired me part time. So that was kind of like my first taste of networking because of all the
Mm-hmm.
connections I made around the station. My first real experience networking was at the baseball winter meetings in 2016 in Washington, D.C. And that's actually where I made a bunch of buddies that were breaking into baseball around the same time, who I still keep in touch with today.
Right. Wow.
Mhm.
So you really didn't get started until after school. That's really interesting because I feel like, now as a university student, it really is prioritized that you should be networking, when you're like a sophomore or junior. So it's interesting to hear that you
Yep.
kind of got started a little later. One thing, I mean, you'll probably agree with this, it's something that Scott brought up. working in media, especially sports media, and then more specifically baseball media, Scott said this can be a really small, really competitive industry, and it can be hard to break into. What was it like getting that first role, getting that first position in sports media? Was it kind of like a relief? Were you just overcome with joy, or how did that feel, sort of finally feeling like you were breaking into this industry?
This is an interesting story. So not a lot of people actually know this.
Okay.
But I actually got my first job at my grandmother's funeral.
Oh.
I know, it's a little shocking. So my grandmother, I still think about her. She's actually on the wall with me.
Oh,
I
amazing.
keep a picture of my family, my grandmother, my grandfather, my wife, my dog, my
Oh,
cousins.
brilliant.
So they're always with me.
Amazing.
And so um, she actually was really sick for a long time, and the last time I saw her was at my college graduation. And my first job in baseball didn't come till 2 years later. But I remember like she wasn't going to come down because she was in her 90s. She lived a long, long life. But
Mhm.
I remember her housekeeper said, if you don't do this as your oldest grandson, your first grandchild, you're going to regret not seeing him walk across that stage. And she and my grandfather flew down with my parents and my other set of grandparents. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I remember them asking me,
Amazing.
like, what do you want to do? They knew what I wanted to do. And her words and all my grandparents, but her specifically was just, and her husband, my grandfather, all they
Hmm.
just kept saying was, um, don't ever give up. Keep believing. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. My dad keeps saying that to me all the time when I call him after every game. And all she just said was, keep believing, keep believing. And, I didn't really, I'm not going to say that I didn't really know what to do. I worked
Hmm.
at this radio station. I did news. Wasn't the best thing for me. I'm not a politics guy, but that's what I worked in. And so,
Hmm.
a year in, it kind of pushed me to like, all right, I need to figure out how to get out of this. And so one person told me, join this website. It's, an agency that sends out job leads. And so I actually found a college summer league, which is where guys in college get their reps doing play by play,
Okay.
but they're college students for college internship credit. Now,
Okay.
keep in mind, I found this a year out of graduation.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
most of these internships are for college seniors for credit.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't get paid. And so
Okay.
I applied to this internship needing a paycheck and not getting one for 3 months. I lived with a host
God.
family. And it's because I actually got to work for this summer league team. My mentor there was a anchor at Sirius XM for sports.
Okay.
I still keep in touch with him today. And it's because of that 3-month internship as a 23-year-old
Hmm.
college graduate with all these other kids or college students, baseball
Hmm.
players trying to get their summer work in to get drafted. So I
Yeah.
was easily the oldest kid there, short of just the coaches and everybody working there.
Hmm.
And that after that is when I started to network with a few people. I actually networked with a University of Alabama grad who is a lead broadcaster in Double A. He got
Okay.
me my first job, but I interviewed probably in December. She passed away in January, and I remember I got an email after the ceremony was over, and I was like really excited. I didn't like yell and scream, but I like tapped my dad on the shoulder. I just said,
Hmm.
come into the next room real quick. I said, I don't want to do this right now in front of everybody, but read this email. And I could see my dad started to cry. And he doesn't cry very often. And
Hmm.
so he said, he gave me a big hug and he said, this is it. This is the first step. And so yeah, that was
Amazing.
kind of crazy to get my first job interview or my first job in baseball at her funeral.
Hmm.
And I don't know, I big believer in God, and I think there's a couple of things that you can't really explain, but they say the cardinal, when you see a cardinal, it's like a lost loved one, like coming in to check on you.
Hmm.
I don't know if you ever heard that before. Um, the
Sorry, go
first
on.
job I got was with the St. Louis Cardinals.
Wow.
Kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. Gives you a little
It's
chills. At least it does me.
no, it kind of raises the hair on your neck and stuff. That's really, it's almost kind of touching, a touching tribute and touching time into to the advice that your grandmother gave you as well. That
Hmm.
how in such a sad and what is usually a low moment, you had such a positive thing happen, and you're able to share that emotional moment with your dad. That's really an amazing story, Matt. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
You mentioned something in there as well that on every episode, one of our guests has mentioned, and I find it really interesting that in no matter what career they've worked, they've had the same experience. You mentioned you had a mentor figure when you were an intern.
Mhm.
We've spoke to CFOs, we spoke to people that work in education. I even spoke to a student last week, a friend of mine, and every single person has said at some point they had a mentor in their life. What was it like for you having a mentor? Why do you think mentors are important? And have you had the experience of being a mentor yet?
So, um, you know, I think a mentor is just somebody that, can take you under a wing. It can come from anywhere, really. It can be a
Mm-hmm.
parent, it could be a friend, it could be somebody that you work for. And for me, it was somebody that I worked for today, and was there every step of the way for me. He knew what I wanted to do. He was there to coach me. He was there to kind of pull back on the reins, kind of not put me in my place, but like, if I stepped out, not out of line, but kind
Yeah.
of reel you back in, so to speak. Like, because as an intern, you're trying to make your mark. You know what I mean? Like, at least for me, I was always trying to do something to not catch somebody's eye, but I was always taught that, the way that you make your mark on is always being the guy that is his hands up first. If you want to volunteer, I'm here. You got a question, I'm here to answer. So there were some times where I might have gotten a little bit too bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and so he'd be like, all right, let's rein it back. And it's just somebody that's been there to give me like advice, or even not even just to give me advice, just been there to pat me on the back. Every job I've ever gotten, Jeremy Huber was the guy for the summer league team that I worked for, the Percival
Mm-hmm.
Cannons, who works for Sirius, and every step of the way, he would tell me how proud he was of me, and then throw in a little joke of, I need to find your agent because I need to start getting jobs like you do. So he was great, and I think a mentor is very important, because it's not only somebody that can, again, coach you, but it's somebody that is not a parent, is not a loved one,
Yeah.
that kind of gives you that pat on the back, that reassurance of you're actually doing something right. And don't get me wrong, having that come from my family, my wife, my in-laws is phenomenal. That's in the business. It just means a little bit more, if that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I feel like it's nice to have that different relationship as well. I feel like parents, loved ones, even friends, they're going to try and say the right thing and make you feel good, no matter how well you're doing. So to have that
Correct.
acknowledgement from someone in that industry, it sounds like it's something that can really, lighten your day and just make you comfortable in the fact that you're doing a good job. So that's another interesting perspective in a mentor's, Matt. Again, thanks for that. Well, I want to get more about the separate roles, break down what you've done. So we've got 6 minor league teams. You've worked with 3 universities, and even like we talked about earlier, we joked about your television appearance. Kind of break down some of those roles for us, your day-to-days in those roles, and what experiences you've really enjoyed.
So it's changed everywhere I've been.
Hmm.
Johnson City, I was, looked at as not an intern, but an intern. But basically, I was the lead broadcaster. I was in charge of the media. I was in charge of setting up the broadcast. And it's funny, that was my first job in minor league baseball, and I had no idea what I was doing at all. I will
Hmm.
be the first person to tell you, I showed up every day. I think I remember I quit my job at the radio station in March. The season didn't start until June. So I had 3 months of no paycheck, just and having to
Gosh.
pay rent, make a car
Hmm.
payment, provide for my dog. And I just remember I was just so excited to get that first job. I went down there. I sent a couple text messages to a couple of buddies that had a higher level job than me. I said,
Hmm.
"Hey, it's my first day. Season doesn't start for 3 months. What do I need?" My
Hmm.
good buddy, Jake Eisenberg, I love him to death. And he is the reason I feel like I was so successful in Johnson City, because he
Amazing.
sent me on Amazon. Here's the mixer you'll need, the headset I use, a good crowd mic.
Yeah.
Here's
Hmm.
everything you'll need to set up a good broadcast. And I remember, because he was with the Winston-Salem Dash at the time, and they
Hmm.
played a full season, so 140 games at the time. We only
Gosh.
played 66, and that's home and
Okay.
away. They played
Hmm.
140 home and away. So I
Wow.
remember I texted him, "Hey, you got a second?" It was maybe probably 5 or 6 hours before his first pitch. Again,
Hmm.
I'm preparing for the season. He's in the season.
Hmm.
Shot me a FaceTime call. I had it all hooked up. And I said, "Hey,
Amazing.
something's really not working here. I don't hear myself." He walked me through how to set up the electrical circuit to make sure that, my mixer is connected to my laptop, but that everything going into the mixer is going into my laptop to go broadcast out, and everything playing out of
Yeah.
my laptop is going in the mixer so I can hear it. I remember he set up enough time to walk me through all of my equipment and how to use it, and I still have it to this day. It just collects dust now. But it was probably the best investment that I could make, because at the time at the lower levels, you're the broadcaster, you're the radio producer, you are the media contact, you're making game notes, you're writing recaps, you're doing everything. And so my background as a radio producer at first, I knew how to work a mixer. I knew how to put it into Audition. I knew how to edit audio. So that was the biggest thing for me. That's why I loved my first season in baseball, because I did everything myself. I became self-sufficient in a job that I had no experience in. My GM gave me the keys to the press box and said, I don't know how it works. Figure it out. Go on your way. I figured that if I was able to
start, huh?
A little bit. You know, I told myself, I measured my success that year by, if I was on the air and I didn't hear anything from anybody, it's a success. Sometimes no news is good news. So that was my measure of success.
Do you remember, obviously, this sounds like a really busy time for you. Do you remember kind of what your day in life is? You laid out there, you were doing radio, you were doing media for the games, and you were also the media contact. Do you remember kind of what your days in the life were? I mean, what kind of stuff were you doing day to day here?
At the ballpark at 9, maybe 9:30 if I wanted to get Chick-fil-A breakfast.
Nice, of course.
Making a stat pack in the morning, distributed to all the coaches, home and away, both clubhouses. Okay. Stat pack is something I still do to this day. It's literally a packet of information, stats-wise, for all the coaches. They can measure how their team is doing home and road, last 5, last 10 games. I mean, it gets into the weeds, what they are against this team specifically, you know, standings, schedule, all of that. So it's something I even do, what is it now, 7, 8 years later. It's still something that's done all around minor league baseball. After that, it was, and that would take me 5 seconds, because it's literally just compiling it. It's automated. So I just have to click a few buttons, make the packet, print it, copy it, stick it in the clubhouse. Next, it was game notes. I'd work on them for a couple of hours, and game notes, again, same thing as a stat pack, but it's a little bit more tailored to our team. So, you know, you'd write, and we still have it to this day. Scott does a great job setting up the game notes. I'll help out and do it when I'm broadcasting on the road for the team. But it is just statistical information and maybe some things that you might not get right off of a stat pack. It's maybe a little bit more focused as opposed to broad spectrum of a team. It gets into the weeds of, you know, players, home runs. It gets into, you know, catchers, what their catcher ERA is personally. It's a lot of stuff. So I'd work on that for a couple of hours. Next part of it was, you know, you'd have the staffs get to the ballpark. You'd go to BP. That was my favorite part, even to this day. You know, you go to all these major league games, you watch batting practice as a fan, but getting to stand on the field, lean on the batting cage while they're taking BP, interacting with all of them. It's like you said earlier, I might not be playing, but I'm with the team. You know, I even talk to our manager all the time, and he's great. You know, he tells me all the time that you, Scott, he said, you are with us. You're an extension of us. And that's nice to hear from them, because they're there to do a job, and we're there to cover them, make them look good, and make them sound good. And it's nice to hear a support not only from the head guy himself, the manager, but, you know, great relationship with the players. That to me is what it's all about, is building those cool relationships that you can tell some of their stories, because they put their pants on one leg at a time like us, even though they're otherworldly at times, but they put their pants on one leg at a time like us. So that was my day to day. And after batting practice, it's call the game and then go home, write a recap.
Amazing. No, I mean, honestly, I think I'm a big soccer fan, so I think you've been able to do the same thing on a soccer field with next to soccer players, and then really it sounds like a dream come true for you, Matt. Before we get to what you do with the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp now, I've got to ask, I want to know all about your TV appearances, obviously ESPN Plus, I believe, with Jacksonville University. So please tell us about that. You had to be nervous for your first TV appearance. How did that feel, and what was it like?
You know, it's kind of funny. I was nervous at first because, like I told you, I was the only kid in my senior year media class that wanted to do radio. And, you know, radio and TV are very different. Radio, I'm literally telling you what the clouds are like. I mean, I'm telling you the uniform color. I'm telling you the wind direction. I'm telling you breaking ball, fastball. I'm telling you swing and a miss. I'm telling you swing and a ground ball. TV, you can see everything. So I don't need to do all that. And in radio, the play-by-play guy is the star of the show. In TV, it's your analyst. He's the guy that knows the X's, the O's, the ins, the outs. He's breaking down when, there's a backdoor cut that's open for a layup. He's the guy that's dissecting how it was set up, where the defense was, and what led to that, which is what people like to hear. A lot of fun because I did very minimal TV before Jacksonville University. I did a TV volleyball game at Radford, which was one of the schools that I called men's and women's basketball for, but I had no idea how to do volleyball. I was like, you can see everything. What do I do? And the first time I did it was very rough. And so I filled in for Scott this past off season doing women's basketball. So I was a little nervous because I did remember, have a little flashback to, first time I did this, it was volleyball. It was not good. I did not use that tape. They asked me if I wanted it. I said, absolutely not. Burn it, delete it, light the computer on fire that recorded it, do whatever you can to make sure that doesn't exist. So I was a little nervous. The guy I worked with, Ray Bureau, he's phenomenal. He knew the Jacksonville University Dolphins because he does it with Scott as well. So I was able to lean on him a little bit more for that kind of in-depth analysis of the team, where I was able to kind of get away with talking about what I saw. I mean, I grew up playing baseball. I grew up playing basketball. So I kind of left the in-depth analysis of the Dolphins to him. And then I was able to kind of call the play, dissect what happened, because I have a lot of extensive background in basketball. My dad was a coach for me. He loves basketball and baseball. So yeah, that TV stuff was so much fun. First one was I was getting my sea legs under me, so to speak. The second game felt a lot better. Even the open was a lot better, and that's the one that I ended up using for my website. So I think the first of it was, I'm doing TV. It's been a while. Don't have a lot of experience. Let's just get through it. Let's make it look good as best as I can. If I stumble, it's okay. It is okay. It just shows that I'm human. I'm not, Stuart Scott. I'm not Scott Van Pelt. I'm not going to try to be. I got to be me. And me is not a lot of TV experience, but just take note of what I stumbled on and make sure that after the game, which is what I always try to do, is kind of do a dissection of what happened, what went wrong, what I did well, and then say, I did this well, here's what I could work on for next time. Let's focus on that to make sure that I can bring up to speed what I did well. Let's have my weaknesses become my strengths and my strengths stay my strengths. So that's how it worked for me.
It really sounds like, especially with that TV appearance, that it is something you can always learn, and it's not like you never really stop learning by the sounds of it. Obviously, you've done a lot of work in radio, you've called a lot of games, and all of a sudden you're on TV, you do one, and you absolutely hate it by the sound of it. So it's interesting to see how you can learn from that. You want the first one bound, and the second one you use for your website. I would also, while we're on the topic of it, I did a lot of research about you, Matt, on your website. A lot of it's a great listen. If anyone is interested in work, I would really urge you guys to check it out. More importantly, Matt, on to what you do now. Also, Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, my adopted minor league team, after speaking to Scott. Now, tell us a little bit about what you're doing there and what the rest of the season looks like for you guys.
So here, actually, didn't get this job without my last job, which was the Down East Wood Ducks. I did group sales there, so I sold tickets in addition to being the lead broadcaster there and main media contact. Here, a little bit of that is taken off my plate. Scott is the director of broadcasting and media relations, so he handles a lot of the day-to-day media stuff where, I'll step in, lend a hand when I can. But, my main job as an account executive is selling group tickets, season tickets, and also corporate sponsorships when I have the ability to. And then in addition to calling the game, we're acting as a secondary media contact, acting as the number 2 in media relations. So whether that's producing game notes, writing recaps, assisting with social media posts with highlights in game, because we do highlights kind of as the game is going on, so in real time, which is very cool. And then also helping to lead our interns, helping to lead our communications assistant, who has also taken on more of a media role. So our communications assistant aids with our press releases, our recaps during the game, and he takes a little bit of that off of mine and Scott's plate. So he's the main guy, and I just kind of lend a helping hand when I can and have the ability to and the time.
Amazing. That's cool. No, it's good to hear. It's cool. It sounds like, obviously me and Scott spoke for a while. It sounds like you guys had a great setup there. One thing I found interesting that Scott talked about was how great these minor league players seem to the normal person. But Scott also talks about the gulf between being in the minor leagues and being in the MLB. So that was something I just found interesting as a non-baseball fan as well. I heard you mention, obviously, you guys have some interns as well. I know a lot of people that listen to this show are looking for interns or interns themselves. What's something that you've learned? What are good qualities that you look for in interns now?
It's kind of interesting. So it's kind of funny. Everybody around the office refers to our interns as the army of interns because we usually have between 4 and 5 on a good year. And it's interesting. We don't really look for one specific person because I think that everybody, at least on our intern team that we've had for the last couple of years, we have new interns every year. But what we look for is something that can complement our staff. So, we have an intern that is, and we've had a couple of interns in the past that are strictly photographers, but they will help take in-game photos of not only our players with action shots, but our staff, our ballpark, getting like the environment, the energy. They'll help us with social media. Some of them help us with writing. So some of them this year are interested in broadcasting and media. So we'll have them practice writing recaps and also posting in-game highlights where they do the editing of our highlights, something that Scott and I did back in 2022 when we had our interns. We taught them how to do it, but it was mostly he and I doing it. We'll teach them how to produce radio. When we're on the road, they'll stop by the radio station with our communications assistant and see how a board operates and see how you send us to break, capture the audio, edit it, put it in a file and do all that stuff. So I don't know if we really look for one specific set of skills. We mostly look for something that can complement what we can do as a department, which is, something that we definitely like to have a hand in is social media. And we definitely like the idea that, we can have our interns have a hand in social media presence. I also know that since we have a couple of broadcasts, I try to give them some reps after they've done with their normal intern duties. I like to try to reward them with appearances on our video recorded pregame show, Shrimp Show, which airs in the stadium on the video board. It airs on YouTube. A couple of our interns last year did a really phenomenal job. So they did our sponsored post-game interview on the field with the player of the game. Again, that's not something we do to a lot of interns, but when they show us that they work hard, that they're, they take care of what they need to take care of, you can kind of reward them a little bit by saying, hey, this is something that you have to take very seriously, but I trust you enough from what you've done work-wise with us. You can do this, and we'll go down. I'll help them. We'll all, as a team, pick our player of the game who we want to talk to. And if they get a little nervous, we'll go over some questions. It's maybe 2 questions at the most. It's very easy. And then I tell them, get out of the way of the Gatorade shower, or at least hide the mic so it doesn't get ruined. You can take the shower, just don't let the mic get wet.
It just protects all equipment. No, that's amazing. It sounds like a really rewarding internship study. Where can people find these, Matt? Are they online, or is this something we should be getting in contact with?
I would probably say in preparation for next year, the best person to probably get in touch with is Scott. He oversees a lot of that stuff, at least the initial interview process. His email is Scott, SCOTT, at jaxshrimp.com, JAX shrimp.com.
Perfect. There we go, guys. Well, I actually reached out to Scott on LinkedIn as well. He's been nothing but really kind to me, and obviously, Matt, you've got nothing but good things to say about him as well. So he's definitely not somebody to be scared of. Matt, you've had a lot of wisdom for us, a lot of knowledge. I'm going to call on your last sort of 2 or 3 pieces of advice before we let you go today.
Sure. I'm trying to think. When people ask me for advice, it's kind of interesting. I just try to think of something I would tell my younger self, which was don't be afraid. Any is a good opportunity. I would very much say that don't ever say no. Whether it's something you're interested in or something you're not interested in, figure out how to use something you're not interested in. If there's an opportunity, figure out how to turn it into a positive. I don't like sales. I'm not a good salesman, but I wouldn't be here without taking the Wood Ducks job in 2021 without sales. And to be completely honest, you like it a lot more when you're on a hot streak. So I would venture to say my biggest piece of advice is never say no. Always seek an opportunity to grow. Whether you've made a mistake or you had a great broadcast that you think, there's always something to work on, and never be complacent. If you think that you called a great game, you don't have anything to work on, there's guys at the highest level probably still figuring out what they need to do better, because you don't want to be the guy that somebody behind you climbs over you because they're willing to put the time in and work. If you have enough time during the day, the old joke is if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. So if you have time to yourself, and if you really want to do something, you figure out how to get better each and every day. And that's the biggest thing that I could take away from, even for me, is no matter what, there's always something you can do to get better.
100%. Brilliant. Matt, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today. It's been amazing speaking with you, sir.
Thank you so much, Jack. It was a pleasure. And, I hope I was able to do as good a job as Scott.
Absolutely brilliant. Guys, more episodes coming usually either every Wednesday or Sunday. Any other news and updates, that's on Instagram and TikTok at the Brodie Blueprint. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you again.
Well, that's all for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and were also able to gain some valuable insight into a potential career. Please head over to Instagram and TikTok and follow us. That's the Brodie Blueprint. And also don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube as well. If you guys have any guests that you want to see on the podcast or any industries that you want to see guests appear from, please let us know. Until next time, guys. See you later.